light drizzle fell across the city's skyline as dawn broke over the glass spires and concrete streets. In the dim morning light, pedestrians moved hurriedly, shoulders hunched beneath jackets, always in a rush to arrive somewhere more important than where they were. Scheduled trains rumbled beneath curbs, horns sounded from overworked drivers, and the bustle of business began even before daylight could fully emerge. In a cramped alley off the main road stood a nondescript neon-lit sign reading "Cosima's Curiosities and Fortunes Told." Very few people noticed this little shop, sandwiched between a vacant retail unit and a shuttered coffee bar. They passed right by, jostled by crowds, or stared at their electronic companions and missed it entirely. Yet that was exactly how Cosima preferred it. Inside, Cosima's store looked like a haphazard museum dedicated to the arcane and mystical. Ancient tomes, scraps of parchment, and shelves of battered relics fought for space with cheap, modern trinkets. Crystal balls sat next to old radios, carved jade figurines lined up beside plastic dinosaurs. Strands of black feathers and dried herbs hung from the ceiling, casting odd shadows that sometimes seemed to quiver of their own accord. A dusty window overlooked a fire escape, where an unusual wind chime made of rib bones tinkled quietly whenever the slightest breeze slipped through. By day, Cosima read fortunes for the occasional passerby who willingly parted with a few bills to hear her interpret the cards or gaze into her smoky orb. By night, she often found herself alone with the vibrating hum of the city, overshadowed by the hum of something else, something she had only recently noticed, throbbing within the walls. But Cosima was used to secrets. She had spent most of her youth learning how to interpret cryptic signals from the realm just beyond sight. Lately, that realm felt dangerously close, like a breath on the nape of her neck. Everyone knew the financial district thrummed with powerful energy, money, ambition, possibility. But Cosima sensed there was something more here than just deals and commerce. She felt it in the very mortar of the towers that sprouted in steel canyons. Something intangible, ancient, and waiting to take shape again. Night after night she dreamed of an overlay of swirling symbols above the skyscrapers, luminous golden patterns that coiled into a corridor of light. It was all pure speculation until one evening her visions grew uncomfortably precise. That night she sat at the battered wooden table in her side room, a single candle flickering. The shadows it cast stretched across her worn tarot deck. Cosima's hands trembled slightly as she began to shuffle. A voice lurked in her mind, not her own thoughts, but a whisper from the other side. She flipped a card. The Tower. The candle threatened to sputter out. Then came the Magician, reversed. Finally, the World, ominously upright. Her breath quickened as the shapes of the cards blurred into dancing silhouettes. When she closed her eyes, she witnessed a street-like labyrinth twisting into the sky, windows warping into ancient rooms. Briefly, she saw men in suits streaked with magical light, their eyes flaring with unexpected power. Strains of prophecy pulsed through her head in shards of half-formed sentences. So she hurriedly grabbed a pen and scribbled what she could onto the back of a receipt. When sky meets steel, the city's future opens the rift. The summoning shall grant new magic to the unknowing. Beware the illusions, for they are not illusions at all. She couldn't pull herself away from the restless energy of these omens. They coursed through her, bright and ablaze. Something was coming. The words seared themselves into her brain, refusing to be dismissed. The next morning, sleepless but determined, Cosima left her cramped shop. She zipped up her purple coat, perched a wide-brimmed black hat on her head, and ventured toward the district that beckoned. Financial Tower Row soared overhead, reflective buildings gilded by the early sunshine, each floor a monument to commerce and ambition. Security cameras perched at every angle, and throngs of employees marched in, heads bowed against the wind. None of them noticed Cosima weaving among them with watchful eyes. She found a spot in front of a spiraling skyscraper, that seemed disguised by perpetually tinted windows. There was a stone sign near the base that read, Zygand Financial Risk Management Division. Cosima lingered there. The sense of a powerful shift, of something crossing a hidden threshold, gnawed at her. She had no contact inside, no friend with an invitation, so she lingered on the sidewalk. Anxiety thrummed in her chest when she thought about going through the revolving doors. But she knew she must. If her vision was correct, this was the place, or at least the first place. This was where the boundaries would ripple, where the ordinary office routine would twist into the extraordinary. She steeled her nerves, strode forward, and slipped inside along with a knot of employees who barely registered her presence. She nodded at an oblivious security guard standing near an imposing metal detector. No alarms rang out. All seemed normal. Her footsteps clicked across the marble floor as she attempted to adopt the same brisk stride as those around her. The interior had vaulted ceilings and glass walls that rose in looming arcs. Despite the hum of constant conversation and the ring of telephones, Cosima sensed a deeper reverberation. It was like a hidden octave no one else could hear. She paused to adjust her hat, inwardly focusing on that intangible hum, and felt her blood turn electric. "May I help you?" came a curt voice. A woman in a muted grey suit stood at a reception counter, an eyebrow arched in Cosima's direction. Cosima nearly lost her composure. Then she cleared her throat. I have an appointment." She fished around in her pockets, feigning a search for some kind of confirmation. "It's with Mr. Nyarin. Something about future analysis." The woman paused, eyes drifting over Cosima's eccentric attire. Her name tag read Carla Brennan. On Carla's desk the phone rang twice, but she ignored it, attention pinned to Cosima's every move. "I don't recall an appointment for any Mr. Nyarin." She tapped at her computer, her expression cool. A sudden rush of intuition surged through Cosima. She glanced at Carla's face, and without knowing why, she realized Carla was not quite an ordinary person. Maybe Carla didn't know it herself, yet, but a faint glow ringed her form. Cosima could see the swirl of potential radiating around the woman, as if she stood on the precipice of something world-changing. Intrigued, Cosima's voice came out in a tone more confident than before. "A special appointment," she said, letting just a hint of otherworldly authority seep in. "Analyzing new realms, touching the futures." She watched Carla carefully. Carla's pupils dilated, and something flickered in her expression. She cleared her throat and looked down at her computer again. "In that case, maybe you should speak to Mr. Lessiter in emerging markets. 4th floor, left hall, corner office. He often deals with alternative projections." Cosima smiled. "Thank you." That flicker in Carla lingered, and Cosima finally recognized it. It was a spark of incipient magic. Carla had no clue, but the tiny threads jittered in her aura. The time was near. Something truly had started to awaken in the heart of the building. She made her way to the elevator banks. People around her chattered about project deadlines, stock fluctuations, and dinner reservations. These were ordinary concerns in an ordinary corporate environment, yet Cosima sensed the extraordinary stirring beneath the chatter. She pressed the button for the 4th floor. The elevator door slid open into a corridor of glass walls and polished floors. Rows of cubicles stretched out, dotted by individuals typing, calling, and scanning spreadsheets on monitors. She heard the clang of a water cooler, the rustle of paper, the squeak of shoes. It all looked normal until a slender man stepped out of an office, gesturing furiously as he spoke to a colleague, and a spiral of faint light swirled around his head. To Cosima's trained eye, it looked like a nascent aura. The transformation had begun. She drifted among the cubicles, scanning nameplates until she found Emerging Markets Alexander Lassiter. She peered in, but the office was empty. A scatter of financial charts and a glass orb sat on his desk. That orb looked unnervingly similar to hers, Though more opaque and swirling with faint plumes of color, she felt compelled to approach. Just as Cosima reached out to touch the strange orb, she heard a voice behind her. "What are you doing in here?" She turned to face a tall, slender man with a carefully styled haircut. He carried a tablet in one hand and wore an expensive watch on the other. His tie bore a modern geometric pattern, and his expression was stern yet curious. Judging from the nameplate on the door, this was Alexander Lassiter. He moved into the office briskly, setting his tablet down. "I don't believe we have an appointment." Cosima cleared her throat, willing herself to remain composed. Perhaps honesty, or some version of it, was the best approach. "Not exactly. My name is Cosima, and I read fortunes. I'm here because my visions and my observations tell me that something very significant is about to happen here. Something involving this overlap between our reality and—" She gestured to the swirling orb on his desk. "Whatever that is." Lassiter stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he closed his office door. "You've seen it too? The signs?" Cosme nodded, heart pounding. "Yes, they're getting stronger, culminating soon. The city itself, especially this part of it, is on the verge of a supernatural collision. People are about to discover powers. Not illusions, but real magic. If we're not cautious, we could unleash chaos." He took a measured breath. "Do you have proof?" Nerves crackled through Cosima. She rummaged in her coat pocket and withdrew the slip of paper scrawled with her notes. Handing it to him, she explained the vision of swirling light above the skyline, men in suits wielding sorcery, and the intangible hum she'd felt in the building's foundation. He read the slip as though searching for hidden meaning. Finally, he opened a drawer. Inside lay a small crystal carved to resemble a stylized key, each facet shimmering with shimmering colors. "I found this at an antique dealer. The man told me it had some arcane significance, though he wouldn't say more. Ever since I brought it here, I've perceived strange phenomena. My staff has reported static discharges around their desks, illusions in reflections. I suspect this key might be acting as a conduit." He placed the crystal on the desk next to the swirling orb. The orb glowed faintly. "At first, I thought I was hallucinating," he admitted softly. "But now, I can't ignore it. Numbers no longer look like mere figures. They speak to me, revealing patterns, potential futures. My analyses have become more than guesswork." His gaze sharpened on Cosima. "This is the financial district's lifeblood. Information, predictions, risk. If that transforms into real magic, what do you think happens next?" Cosima felt a thrill of fear. "Absolute chaos or absolute revolution. There's not much in between. If everyday people suddenly become gifted with magical insight, everyone is going to want an edge. Greed is a powerful thing." A shadow flitted across Lassiter's features. "We have to keep this controlled. My superiors, some of them won't hesitate to exploit this. They already exploit everything else." He turned to the glass wall behind him, which overlooked a portion of the city street. "But that might also mean it's too late to fully contain." A thunderous crack startled them, reverberating through the building. Overhead, fluorescent lights fluttered, and the orb on Lassiter's desk shimmered with a hypnotic brilliance. Outside, co-workers murmured, "What was that? And is there an earthquake?" Before either could respond, the orb's swirling color expanded in a pulse. They watched through the glass wall as translucent shapes flickered into existence, superimposed on the rows of cubicles, arching doorways, swirling runes, webs of intangible lines connecting people at their desks. Cosima felt reality twist, as though multiple layers were colliding. She glimpsed Carla from the front desk, momentarily outlined in a crackling purple aura, her eyes wide in alarm. Carpets shifted in color, monitors flickered, and the hum became a roar. What was happening? A portal forming within the structure of the building itself. Lassiter and Cosima emerged from the office, pushing past stunned employees. Outside, the corridor looked half-corporeal. Ghostly illusions overlapped the real walls, forming a labyrinth of flickering geometry. A man in a suit was lifted off his feet, struggling as invisible forces clutched his limbs. Another woman dialed frantically on her phone, only to watch the device spark and emit a tiny bolt of lightning that scorched the ceiling tile. Whispers of magic manifested in small but jarring ways across the floor. Carla ran toward them, a bright aura around her. She searched Cosima's face with panic. What is going on? I'm seeing... She trailed off as a swirl of turquoise light traced the veins in her hands. Is this real? Cosima placed a hand on Carla's shoulder. Through that touch, Cosima sensed raw, untapped potential. This woman could summon illusions or manipulate energy if trained. It's as real as you or me, she said. It's magic, seeping through. A resounding creak echoed through the tower, metal straining. Through the glass windows, Cosima glimpsed shadows above the neighboring skyscrapers. The swirling golden lines of her vision expanded across the cityscape, forging ephemeral walkways high in the sky. Cars below ground to a halt as drivers stared up, uncertain whether they were seeing an extreme weather phenomenon or something else entirely. The building's alarm blared. An official-sounding voice crackled through the intercom. Attention! All personnel must evacuate the premises. Please proceed. Then the announcement fizzled into static. Next came a resonant hum. People in the lobby poured outside as sprinklers sprayed overhead, as if the building didn't quite know how to handle the surge of otherworldly power. We have to get out, yelled an intern, pointing toward the emergency stairs. Yet as he sprinted, a shimmering rift erupted in the open doorway, spitting sparks that caused him to recoil in alarm. Lassiter exchanged a hard glance with Cosima. We can't stampede the entire building into chaos. People will be hurt, but if we do nothing, the rift expands and merges the realms. Cosima shut her eyes, focusing inward. She pictured herself in her cluttered shop, the swirling lines overhead, the hush of secrets. She whispered a soft incantation, an improvised prayer for clarity. She wasn't sure what she could do, only that she had to try. When she opened her eyes, she saw that the corridor had begun to shift again. The illusions, once ephemeral, started to coalesce into something more solid. Walls warped, archways framed doorways that never existed, and people's fingertips glowed with magical sparks. Driven by desperation and fear, they inadvertently tapped into stray powers, conjuring illusions of monstrous shapes that hopped across the floor, or sending ripples of shaking energy through the office furniture. At the far end of the hallway, a swirling portal shimmered in midair, a gateway that seemed to beckon. Cosima, we need to close that, Lassiter said, nodding toward the portal, though he gripped the crystal key in his hand. I think the key is fueling it. Carla gazed from Lassiter to Cosima as the building lurched again. How do we close a portal? She asked, her voice shaky. A swirling wind tore through the corridor, sending papers swirling like frantic birds. From the portal's threshold came an eerie glow, as though a foreign sun lay just beyond. Dim silhouettes hinted at a world akin to a labyrinth of obsidian spires. Cosima clenched her jaw, uncertain how to proceed. This was beyond her typical scrying and gentle fortunes, but the prophecy words flooded her mind anew. The summoning shall grant new magic to the unknowing. Beware illusions, for they are not illusions at all. She beckoned Carla over. You can draw from the ambient energy, she whispered. Focus on that fear and turn it into willpower. Will can shape magic. We need to gather all this stray magic into a single intention, to seal the rift. Carla, eyes filled with apprehension, but also a new spark of courage, nodded. Nearby employees crowded against walls or peered out from behind upended desks, uncertain how to help. Many of them were trembling, but some looked at Carla with desperate hope. They too felt an awakening inside. Cosima realized this moment wasn't solely about Carla or Lassiter. Everyone was immersed in magic's new presence. A flash of intuition struck Cosima. They must unify their efforts, she swiftly instructed the onlookers. Whether or not you believe in magic, just Concentrate on firming up reality. Focus on everyday normalcy. Picture your world as it was, stable, unbroken. Let that image fill your mind. We can weave that stability into a shield. People eyed her quizzically, but desperation outweighed skepticism. They closed their eyes, collectively willing the building back to normal. Some uttered fervent prayers, others whispered mantras. Carla inhaled, then raised her palms, letting the swirling turquoise lines in her arms glow with intent. Lassiter, with the crystal key, added his focus. The orb on his desk rattled with surging energy. Cosima felt the wave of intent ripple through the corridor. The illusions flickered as though uncertain whether to remain. The portal crackled, resisting them, shimmering bright one moment and dim the next. She could sense a force behind it, some presence in that other realm, pushing back, wanting to break through, to merge the two worlds. At that moment, the overhead lights exploded in a shower of sparks. Energy poured from the building's electronics, funneling straight into the swirling portal. People screamed. Cosima's ears rang from the sudden surge. She felt her own protective incantation falter. Then a shape moved in the portal's threshold, like a tall figure with elongated limbs, silhouette edged in pale blue flame. Carla staggered, losing her concentration. Lassiter clutched the crystal key, shouting something lost in the roaring wind. Cosima's eyes stung from the beam of light in the corridor, but she steeled herself. She pulled out her battered tarot deck, fanning it out in her hands, searching for a symbolic anchor strong enough to sway fate. Her gaze settled on the High Priestess, mysterious knowledge and hidden power. She clutched that card and used it as a focus for her next words. By the veiled knowledge, by the gates unguarded, let the passage be closed. Her voice echoed with surprising resonance. She flung the High Priestess card forward. As it tumbled, it caught a blaze of magic from all around. The image shimmered, and the figure in the portal reeled back, as if stung by a sudden barrier. In that instant, Carla regained her composure, funneling her new powers into the combined shield. Lassiter joined in, pressing the crystal key against the swirling orb, and it emitted a dazzling array of sparks. The illusions that had overtaken the walls flickered violently. For a heartbeat, it felt as though the world had paused, caught between two realities. Then, with a sound like thunder ripping through a canyon, the portal imploded, sucking the spectral shapes out of the corridor. The overhead storm of sparks died out, drifting harmlessly to the floor. A hush fell over the entire floor, broken only by distant car horns from the city streets below. People took tentative breaths, uncertain if the nightmare had ended. Cosima centered herself and scanned the area. The illusions had receded. The mundane structure of the building was restored, though fragments of leftover magic danced in the corners. Carla's aura, though dimmer now, remained. She looked at Cosima for guidance, voice hushed. Is it over? Lassiter answered in a subdued tone. For now. But he looked at the crystal key which lay inert in his palm. Magic has awakened in us. Even if that rift is sealed, we can't pretend it never happened. Cosima ran a hand through her hair, exhaling slowly. She felt exhausted, and the day had barely started. Indeed. The boundary was torn open, if only briefly. The tide of magic has ebbed, but we can't guarantee it won't surge again. We've shown ourselves capable of harnessing it, and where there is possibility, there are those who will run toward it or try to exploit it. Through the shattered glass panel, they could see other officers in the distance and glimpses of employees drifting into the hall. Shell-shocked. Some carried minor injuries. Others merely looked dazed. Rumors would spread. Stories would swirl, no matter how the corporate spin doctors tried to cover it. Dozens, if not hundreds of people had witnessed the flicker of a magical realm, and many had tasted power, felt it in their muscles or throbbing in their temples. The city had changed. In the weeks that followed, there would be new abnormalities, new sightings. The finance world that prided itself on calculating risk and reward would find an entirely unpredictable element in the mixture. Magic was real, and it had chosen to reveal itself in the city's heart of commerce. Cosima knew she couldn't return to her humble shop and carry on as if nothing had happened. The prophecy had only partially played out. Now there was momentum, and one couldn't simply stuff magic back into the cracks of an old building. As employees began helping one another, Carla gently soothed a colleague who kept seeing after-images of monstrous beasts roving the cubicles. Lassiter returned the orb and crystal key to his locked drawer, though the top of the desk was now scorched and chipped from the discharge. Cosima helped calm frantic hearts, using small spells to reduce anxiety, murmuring words that coaxed the lingering illusions to fade. Once matters were somewhat under control, Lassiter pulled Cosima aside. "We have a responsibility now," he said quietly. "I worry about the rest of the city. If these towers can open portals, a rift anywhere else could do the same. We need to manage this responsibly. There's a bigger conversation to be had, involving not just finance but the city's leadership, and maybe beyond." "Yes," Cosima agreed. She felt a profound soberness settling over her. "We also need to make sure no one tries to harness this power unethically. Greed can poison magic, transform it into something worse." He nodded, but concern lingered in his eyes. The old structures, political, corporate, social, weren't built to handle real sorcery. Neither were the city's inhabitants, yet the future was unwritten. Perhaps if guided carefully, the new powers could bring about justice and progress, or perhaps it would unleash unstoppable turmoil. All Cosima knew was that prophecy had pointed here to the moment of rift. Now that moment had come and gone, and what happened next was more unpredictable than any reading she'd ever given. She left the building along with the rest of the evacuees, stepping out into a city bathed in midday sun. Sirens sounded from emergency services, while overhead the skyscrapers stood tall, reflecting the sky's serene blue. The morning's chaos cast an uneasy hush over the block as red and blue lights flashed against the glass facades. Yet she noticed the faint shimmer around people passing on the sidewalk, glimpses of possibilities ready to spark. It was as though a door had been cracked open in everyone's mind. Returning to her shop, Cosima felt unmoored. She paused under the neon sign, then stepped inside. The dusty hush welcomed her, a place of old curiosities and battered relics. Everything seemed small now compared to what she had just witnessed. The sense of a hidden realm was stronger here, too, as though it recognized an ally. She let out a shaky breath. Where to from here? She sank into her reading chair. Part of her wanted to pluck a new tarot spread, to glean the potential shape of tomorrow, but she suspected the cards wouldn't fully clarify the path ahead. Perhaps the prophecy was no longer something to interpret, but something to live. She spent hours in that chair, letting the city's new magical pulse thrum around her. The future had indeed opened the rift, and workers in suits had become accidental sorcerers. Now the real question was, how would they wield that power? That night, she dreamed again of luminous signs over the towers. Only this time, they were not unknown. She saw silhouettes of Carla, Lassiter, and countless others forging new roads between the mundane and the magical. Unsure if they would unite or stand apart, she awoke to the silent promise of dawn, heart pounding with the knowledge that her every action, every reading, could shape this new era. The city's next transformation was more than prophecy. It was already in motion. And whether it brought enlightenment or havoc depended on the hearts of those who found magic in their hands when they least expected it. Outside, the towers glimmered in the rising sun, silent guardians of a new reality. And in her little shop, Cosima felt a surge of cautious hope, for the day had arrived when visions took form, and for better or worse, no path remained closed any longer.